Kublai Khan, the untold story of Kublai Khan's empire. What if I told you that the greatest Chinese emperor of the 13th century wasn't Chinese at all, but a Mongol warrior born in the mud and chaos of the steppe? That he swapped arrows for scrolls, yurts for palaces, and conquered not just cities, but the very soul of China itself? But how did a horse-riding nomad become the emperor of the world's most sophisticated civilization? Why did he build a pleasure dome so grand it inspired English poetry centuries later? Kublai Khan was born in 1215, not in a palace with silk sheets and cucumber water, but in the gritty, horse-scented chaos of the Mongolian steppe. His grandfather? Oh, just Genghis Khan, the guy who turned nomadic herders into the most terrifying army on earth. By the time baby Kublai was teething, Genghis had already flattened the Shi, Xia, and Jin dynasties and captured Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, like a toddler grabbing toys from a playpen. Kublai's dad, Tolui, was Genghis's youngest legitimate son, emphasis on legitimate. Genghis had more kids than a reality show family. But Kublai wasn't raised by his war-hardened father. Nope, he was brought up by his mother, Sorkotani Beki, a Christian princess with the brains of a scholar and the sass of a sitcom matriarch. She taught Kublai to read, exposed him to Chinese philosophy, and basically turned him into the Mongol Empire's first Renaissance man. While most Mongol boys were learning how to wrestle wolves and drink fermented mare's milk, Kublai was sipping tea and pondering Confucian ethics. He could ride a horse like a thunder god, but he also knew that good governance wasn't just about stabbing things. In 1236, Uncle Ogedei, Genghis's successor and part-time wine barrel impersonator, gave Kublai a fiefdom in Hebei. Kublai, being young and allergic to paperwork, outsourced everything to Mongol tax agents who were about as subtle as a wrecking ball in a porcelain shop. The province emptied faster than a buffet at a sumo tournament. Eventually, Ogedei gave Kublai the shape up or ship out talk, and Kublai got serious. He fired the raiders, hired Chinese bureaucrats, and started ruling like a pro. He even began to surround himself with Chinese advisors, much to the horror of his Mongol peers, who thought reading was for weaklings and tea was suspiciously unfermented. Kublai's fascination with Chinese culture wasn't just a phase, it was a full-on lifestyle. He embraced Buddhism, admired Confucianism, and adopted the radical idea that maybe, just maybe, the people of an empire mattered as much as its rulers. This was like a Mongol suddenly deciding to become a vegan yoga instructor. Meanwhile, the Mongol Empire was busy steamrolling Europe. Kiev, toast. Krakow, crushed. Vienna, about to get Mongoled. But then, in 1241, Ogedei died of a stroke, possibly from lifting his wine goblet, and the Mongol war machine screeched to a halt. The raiders turned around mid-pillaging and went home to sort out succession drama. After a few years of political musical chairs, Kublai's brother Monkey became Great Khan. Monkey, like Kublai, was obsessed with China. And thus began the Mongol pivot from let's conquer everything to let's rule wisely and maybe build some libraries. So, it's 1251. Monkey Khan, newly crowned and probably still adjusting his ceremonial hat, decides to test his little brother Kublai. And what better way to do that than to hand him northern China like it's a birthday present and say, here, conquer the Dali kingdom. Try not to mess it up. Now, Kublai had never led a military campaign. His resume read more like tea enthusiast than battle-hardened general. Mongol warlords whispered, this guy's gonna be the Genghis Khan of disaster. But Kublai wasn't about to let his legacy be written in slapstick. He spent a whole year prepping, studying Chinese military texts, practicing tactics, probably doing motivational mirror pep talks. Then in 1253, he mounted his horse, rallied his troops, and rode into the Dali kingdom like a man with a plan and a library card. And here's where things got weird. Instead of the usual Mongol strategy of burn everything and ask questions never, Kublai went full philosopher king. He treated the Dali people with mercy, spared lives, and even tried diplomacy. Mongol generals blinked in disbelief. Mercy? Diplomacy? What next? Hugging the enemy? But Kublai's strategy worked. By 1256, the Dali kingdom was his, and not a single Black Forest gâteau had been fired from a cannon. Fresh off his conquest, Kublai didn't just sit around polishing his trophies. He went north and built Xanadu, a city so legendary it made Versailles look like a garden shed. Designed with feng shui precision, Xanadu was nestled between mountains and rivers, a perfect blend of Mongol might and Chinese elegance. It had walls, towers, and a population of 200,000. At its heart stood a palace so opulent it made Coleridge write poetry in a fever dream. And Kublai wasn't just building cities, he was building ideologies. In 1258, he hosted a religious debate between Buddhists and Taoists. After hearing both sides, he declared Buddhism the winner and made it northern China's official religion. The Taoists probably sulked, but Buddhism got a major boost across East Asia. But power breeds paranoia. Mongol, watching Kublai's popularity soar, sent agents to Xanadu to purge his Chinese advisors. It was like a medieval HR audit with swords. Civil war loomed, but Mongol backed off, realizing he needed Kublai for the big fight against the Song dynasty. In 1259, the invasion began, but fate had other plans. Mongol died mid-siege, probably from overexposure to siege ladders and stress. And just like that, the Mongol Empire was a Game of Thrones episode waiting to happen. With Mongol gone, two brothers stepped up, Kublai in the south and Aragbog in the Mongol heartland. Both held Kurultais, Mongol leadership summits, both declared themselves Great Khan, and both essentially said, let's settle this the old-fashioned way. Kublai made peace with the Song, dashed back to Xanadu, and got himself elected Khan in 1260. Aragbog responded with his own election, probably while muttering copycat. The empire was split. Kublai had the wealth and cities, Aragbog had the homeland and tradition. The war dragged on until 1264, when Kublai defeated Aragbog. But the north never truly fell in line. The new rebel, Kaidu, popped up like a sequel nobody asked for and ran his own show. The Mongol Empire was now less one big happy family and more a bunch of squabbling cousins with armies. With Aragbog out of the way, Kublai turned back to the Song dynasty. And oh boy, the Song weren't pushovers. They had 1 million soldiers, gunpowder, siege engines, and a navy with ships so big they made Viking longboats look like pool toys. But Kublai wasn't just chasing conquest, he was chasing a dream. China hadn't been unified since the Tang dynasty 360 years earlier. That's like someone today trying to reunite the Holy Roman Empire. It was bonkers. It was bold. It was Kublai. By 1271, he'd founded the Yuan dynasty and made Beijing his capital. Song generals began defecting. In 1276, the boy emperor of the Song was captured and taken to Beijing. The final resistance ended in 1279 with a massive naval battle near modern Macau. Kublai, aged 63, had done it. China was his. In 1275, 3 dusty Venetians arrived at Kublai's palace. One was a young lad named Marco Polo, who looked around and said, I'm never leaving. Kublai agreed, and Polo stayed for 16 years, becoming the empire's unofficial hype man. Whoa, still with us? That means you've survived Mongol sibling drama, divine typhoons, and a pleasure dome that would make Vegas blush. If you're loving this wild ride through history's most unpredictable emperor, then don't just sit there like a stunned Song dynasty soldier. Smash that subscribe button like Kublai smashed the gates of Dali. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a tale of conquest, chaos, and questionable royal diets. Under Kublai, China boomed. There was paper money, a postal service, religious freedom, and even an attempt to create a universal language, which flopped harder than Esperanto. He commissioned accurate maps, built medical institutes, and improved the calendar. He flipped Chinese society on its head. Artisans and doctors, once dismissed as handsy weirdos, were now celebrated. Tax breaks flowed, science flourished, and the economy soared. But beneath the glittering surface, trouble brewed. Kublai's Yuan dynasty, while Chinese in style, was deeply discriminatory toward actual Chinese people. Mongols and foreigners were favored in government, while Han Chinese were often sidelined. Kublai wore the robes, spoke the language, and played the part of emperor. But the empire he built was a hybrid, neither fully Mongol nor fully Chinese. And that uneasy blend would eventually lead to unrest, rebellion, and the fall of the Yuan. Imagine China under the Yuan dynasty as a giant social cake, except instead of frosting and cherries, it's layered with inequality and resentment. Top layer, Mongols, the ruling class, the VIPs of the empire. They held all the key posts, strutted around in fur-lined robes, and probably had conqueror embroidered on their bath towels. Second layer, useful foreigners. These were the empire's consultants, Muslim treasurers, Persian astronomers, and Marco Polo court the Venetian travel blogger who somehow became a government official. Third layer, Northern Chinese. These folks got the joy of paying taxes so heavy they made elephants look weightless. They were tolerated, but only just. Bottom layer, Southern Chinese, considered lower than vermin. If Yuan society were a party, they'd be the ones not invited, but still forced to clean up afterward. The result? Millions of Chinese crushed under taxes, treated like strangers in their own land, and probably wondering if the Mongol conquest came with a return policy. Now let's talk about the man himself. If you're picturing Kublai as a serene, robe-clad philosopher sipping tea in a lotus garden, think again. In his later years, Kublai drank like a fish, ate like a pig, and, well, let's just say he was prolific in the romance department. The result? A gout-ridden, bloated emperor who could barely waddle through his marble palace without snapping at servants or tripping over his own indulgence. He was less wise sage and more imperial Jabba the Hutt. Yet despite his transformation into a temperamental blob, Kublai's legacy remained monumental. Chinese historians didn't treat the Yuan as a foreign hiccup. They included it in the imperial lineage, a rare honor shared only with the Qing dynasty. But Kublai wasn't just a ruler. He was a man torn between two identities. Inside his head, two voices bickered like sitcom roommates. Kublai the emperor loved Chinese philosophy, wanted to build cities, promote Buddhism, and maybe invent a new language. Kublai the Khan wanted to conquer everything that moved, preferably while riding a horse and shouting. Sadly, in his twilight years, the warrior won out. And oh boy, did things go downhill. Japan, 1274 and 1281. Twice he sent fleets to invade. Twice typhoons obliterated them. The Japanese called it kamikaze, divine wind. Kublai probably called it why me. Vietnam and Burma, invaded twice each. One technically, but at such insane costs it was like winning a gold medal and realizing the podium was made of debt. Java, 1292. The Mongols won, but were so riddled with tropical diseases they had to retreat faster than you can say malaria. It was like watching a once great athlete trip over his shoelaces repeatedly. By the end, Kublai's conquests were less epic saga and more tragic blooper reel. Then came the heartbreak. In 1281, Kublai lost his favorite wife. In 1285, his eldest son died. These twin tragedies hit him harder than any battlefield defeat. He withdrew from governance, drowned his sorrows in wine and roast duck, and let the empire run itself. By the time Marco Polo finally left court, Kublai was a shadow of his former self, fat, unhappy, and surrounded by luxury that felt more like a gilded cage than a throne. On February 18, 1294, Kublai Khan died. His body was buried in a secret location in Mongolia, just like his grandfather Genghis. To this day, no one knows where he lies, perhaps beneath the steppe, perhaps beneath centuries of legend. But death was not the end. Two things ensured Kublai's immortality. Marco Polo's book, published in 1298, it painted Kublai as a wise, benevolent ruler presiding over a land of wonders. It was part travelogue, part fantasy novel, and all PR gold. The fall of the Yuan. Though Kublai's descendants ruled for 30 more years, uprisings began in 1324. By 1368, the Ming dynasty had conquered China, and the Mongols retreated to the steppe, never again a major force. But Kublai's story didn't end there. In 1644, the Ming fell to the Manchu invaders who founded the Qing dynasty. Looking for inspiration, they turned to the last successful foreign rulers of China, the Yuan. In Kublai Khan, they found a model, a foreign emperor who embraced Chinese culture, ruled wisely, at least early on, and left behind a legacy of grandeur. The Qing emulated his style, his policies, even his multicultural court. And so, Kublai's influence stretched across centuries, shaping dynasties long after his bones had turned to dust. Today, Kublai Khan is less remembered as a historical figure and more as a symbol of romance, mystery, and poetic grandeur. Thanks to Coleridge's In Xanadu Did Kublai Khan and Marco Polo's glowing memoirs, he lives on as a semi-mythical emperor of elegance and power. No other Mongol leader, save Genghis himself, has achieved such immortality. And perhaps no Chinese emperor has ever been so deeply woven into both Eastern and Western imagination. Kublai Khan may be long dead, but his story? Oh, that's still galloping across the steppe of history, silk robes billowing, wine goblet in hand, and 1,000 legends trailing in his wake. If you love this journey through history's wildest tales, don't forget to follow us, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you never miss a single twist, betrayal, or legendary moment. We've got more stories coming that are just as jaw-dropping, poetic, and occasionally ridiculous as Kublai Khan's pleasure dome. Trust me, you'll want front row seats for every one of them.